Hi, everyone. Welcome to another KE Report webinar produced in conjunction with Focus Communications. I'm your host, Corey Fleck, also your host over at the KE Report, our website and podcast that follows along with, mostly focused on resource companies. I'm excited about today's webinar because I'm joined by two different companies, both exploring and operating in pretty much the same jurisdiction. Timberline Resources, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol TBR, and on the OTCQB under the symbol TLRS, as well as I80 Gold, traded on the TSX under the symbol IAU, and on the NYSE under the symbol IAUX. From Timberline Resources, I'm joined by Patrick Highsmith, President and CEO. From I80 Gold, we have Ewan Downie joining us, CEO of I80 Gold. Now, we are going to go through both company presentations as well as answer any of your questions. So if you have any questions, please use the question and answer function or the chat function within this webinar, and I will interject those questions as they fit into the different company presentations, as well as try to fit in a bit of a Q&A at the tail end of this webinar. Before we get into the company-specific presentations, I first want to talk about the area that both of these companies operate in. It is in Nevada, also known as the Eureka Gold Belt. Now, a bit of history here. This actually used to be more of a silver area, more silver focused back in the late 1800s. Now it's shifted more to a gold focus through a lot of pretty high class gold discoveries and mines in the area. Ewan, let's quickly start with you in terms of the Eureka Gold Belt. Give us a little bit of history in terms of what drew your company in this gold belt. What attracts you in the Eureka Gold Belt, please?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Thanks for having me on the podcast here today. What attracted us to the Eureka Gold Belt was just an area that we felt was relatively underexplored, and we were also attracted by the fact that there's more than just gold. There is silver, as you mentioned. There's also significant base metals in the area. So we like the diversification of metals down in the area. And in particular, below the Archimedes pit that we just finished mining at the end of 2021, there is a base metal deposit, but there's also a high-grade sulfide, a refractory deposit. And given we just acquired our own autoclave up on the highway I-80 up in the Battle Mountain Trend, we were looking for another sulfide deposit to help feed that. So it was really important for us to find one, and we felt that the Ruby Hill area has the highest prospectivity for these type of deposits, perhaps in all of Nevada.
Now, Patrick, in terms of the type of deposits, Ewan started going into that, but look, the shift over to gold was also predicated by some better mining techniques. Take us through the type of deposits that we see in this Eureka Gold Belt, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Corey. Good to be with you today and to be joined by you. And the district's geology is fascinating because that silver, lead, zinc event came earlier during the Cretaceous period. So, more or less 100 million years ago. And that was bonanza grade when it was produced in the 1870s through 1890s. Eureka was a much bigger town than it is today with numerous smelters and what have you. And those are called CRD deposits, Corey, carbonate replacement deposits, high-grade silver, lead, zinc. But you know what? There was a lot of gold kicking around even in those days, and it was sort of enigmatic. They didn't really understand why it was so gold rich. Typically, those deposits were not. The Carlin type event came much later, about 38 to 40 million years ago, let's say, younger. That's in the Eocene time period. And that's really a gold dominant event. And it sort of wraps around sometimes those silver deposits. Sometimes it's on the flanks of them. Sometimes it's in completely different rocks. And Timberline arrived in the district through our predecessor company in the early 2000s. I was actually at Newmont at the time, and I looked at Staccato Gold's project down here back in the day to acquire it for Newmont. But they came in a little further south in what we call the Lookout area, and that's pretty much pure Carlin type mineralization there, Corey. We don't see the silver till you get a little east of there or a little deeper. So they're kind of adjacent to each other, sometimes overlapping. And as Ewan said, underneath the pit up there, they've got Carlin type. And then as we know, the 49ers came right through the Carlin area, for instance. We know where their wagon wheel tracks went. And in their gold pans, they wouldn't have seen the gold from a Carlin type deposit. So that was the first issue, is no see-em gold. Similarly, for Eureka, some of these folks were mining, for instance, the historic Windfall mine is right near Carlin type mineralization there, and they may or may not have recognized it in the conventional sense. However, the gold does come out when you process this rock, and there were certainly gold produced by those older mines that could have been attributable to the Carlin type event. So there's sort of that technology, and then the boom of the 80s and the 90s, Corey. Explorers rushed in here. Groups like Echo Bay were in here. Barrick came later. Amselco was in here. And they were drilling the typical sort of 100-meter holes, looked for oxide gold, Carlin-type mineralization that could be heap leached. And that led to the discoveries at Windfall and Lookout on our ground. And, of course, up at I80 Gold's property, Homestake and Barrick, of course, mined the Ruby Hill Archimedes in an open pit operation as well with heap leach. So a bit of technology, bit of geological sort of learnings, and then the boom time of the 80s and 90s certainly resulted in some of what we're now exploring.
Ewan, just one more quick question for you regarding this jurisdiction. Nevada is always ranked in the top couple jurisdictions around the world for getting work done and being able to progress through different permits. I-80 is more advanced than Timberline here. What's been your experience in terms of dealing with the government and moving through permitting processes?
We found it to be very streamlined compared to what we went through. I-80 in 2021 was spun out of Premier Gold Mines. Premier Gold Mines, we were active. We had a mine in Mexico. We were developing a project in northwestern Ontario. And we also had our Nevada projects. And we just found that if you're in Battle Mountain or Carlin, these towns, Eureka is another one, these towns are there because of mining. And pretty much everybody who's there is somewhat involved in the mining industry. So they really see it as a favorable industry for the areas. And everybody that we meet is very pro-mining. We've had very little to no pushback in advancing our projects. And we haven't found that in other countries. So Nevada is definitely, in my view, a very special place. And that's why I80 Gold is 100% focused on the state of Nevada.
Okay. Just a quick little overview then in terms of each company before we get into the presentation. Patrick, give us the quick elevator pitch on Timberline, please.
Timberline's a 100% Nevada gold play. We're focused primarily on Carlin-type gold deposits. We are certainly a pre-discovery valuation sitting at about $30 million U.S. market cap. But we have raised about $12 million over the last 2 years, and a lot of that driven by new institutional investors. I would say we've stepped up our game with these cornerstone shareholders, and we've been aggressively drilling for the last 2 years at Eureka, and we've been drilling some better grade and thickness than previously, and we look forward to telling everybody about that shortly.
Okay, thank you. Ewan, just a quick elevator pitch here for I80 Gold, please.
Yeah, I80 Gold is a company that was formed just over a year ago. We are a producer, but we're also a developer and explorer. We see exploration as being a very big part of our future. The company is one of the largest holders of gold and silver resources in the entire state of Nevada. And we have a growth profile that we believe will make our company the second largest producer in the state, next to Nevada Gold Mines.
Okay. Guys, thank you for that quick little intro on the general area that you're both operating in. We're starting with Timberline, this presentation. Again, I'm going to pop off my video here, but I'm going to be monitoring the questions. So please keep those coming. And hey, Patrick, take us away, please.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're glad you're with us today. So we will take you through Timberline's Eureka project in Nevada. As we've heard, the district is host to new development to the north at I80 Gold and to exploration here in the more southern part of the district from Timberline. Super excited to take you through what we believe is a project with a lot of potential. Now, obviously, I'm a geologist. I'm going to make forward-looking statements. A lot of this information is also quite technical. So please apprise yourself of cautionary language here and on our website. to take a look at highlights, if you will. It's one thing to be an explorer. It's another to be in a great jurisdiction like Nevada. And it's important to realize that an on-trend explorer like this has the potential for great discoveries. We've got a major land package. We have permits in place for lots of drilling. And we've got a foundational resource at Eureka from which we will grow. There's some oxide in that resource, but more importantly, there are higher grade routes that have led to the water well zone discovery, which is down dip from that resource and adjacent to it. We think there's significant growth potential at water well and beyond at higher grades than the existing resource. Just across the valley, we're going to talk about a target called Oswego, where we've again drilled significant thicknesses of greater than 3 grams per ton of oxide gold open in several directions. Up through 2022, sort of year to date, we've announced a number of new intercepts, some of the best drilling ever on the project with a lot of long intervals of greater than 3 grams from multiple drill holes. We'll put those in context for you and show you the lay of the land on the project. There are a lot of other targets on this huge land position, including the historic Windfall mine that we mentioned was operating in the 80s here. In short, we believe the Eureka project, now part of a district that is at least 10 million ounces of gold in historic production and resources, has the potential for greater than 5 million ounces of discovery just on our exploration project alone. We're in the midst of a 7,000 meter drill program, and we'll give you an eye towards where we're drilling so you can put the results, which will start flowing in the next couple of weeks, in context.
Patrick, real quick, just before we get into this, can you just summarize how many discoveries have already been made by the company and approximately how many other targets are you going to be drilling in the near term?
You know, the Lookout Mountain resource, as I'll show in the maps, Corey, covers about 4 kilometers of one trend. There's actually 3 trends with drill indicated gold totaling over 20 kilometers now of strike length of drilling. So I would say we're going to talk about the Lookout Mountain resource, the water well zone new discovery area, the Oswego new discovery area, and the water well zone, which is a historic mined area with drilling around that. So in the years we've been working here, which really go back to 2010 to now, the water well zone is the newest, and the Oswego target are the newest to see drilling. But these are just some of the targets. About 70 square kilometers we hold here, quite a large land position and pretty much contiguous, as you'll see.
Okay, thank you.
The company, as I said, about 160 million shares outstanding, a market cap of around $30 million US. We have about $3 million in the bank US right now in the midst of this drill program. Management and directors have about 16% of the stock. Outside of that, the largest shareholder is Crescat Capital, a gold fund here out of Denver, Colorado. And then, of course, Jupiter Gold and Silver Fund out of London and Ireland is a significant stakeholder as well at just under 10% of the company. Won't need to spend much time here, but just to get you oriented, a refresher, if you will, here's the state of Nevada here. And you can see the major mineralized trends, the Carlin Trend, of course, and then the center of the slide, the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend. We'll be talking about the Eureka Gold Belt down at the town of Eureka, sort of central Nevada, as you can see there. Down in the neighborhood, of course, we have McEwen Mining operating at Gold Bar to the northwest of us. To the southeast, we have Caliber Mining operating the Pan Mine. Ourselves and I80 Gold here dominating this part of the exploration part of the Eureka district. So you're on trend. Nevada, by the way, still cranking out about 5 million ounces a year. If it were a country, I think it would be the 4th largest gold producing country in the world. So truly a world-class mining jurisdiction. And we're just going to talk about one little corner of it here in the Eureka Gold Belt.
Patrick, how much do you use some of these other companies, their data, what they already have found to guide your exploration?
Great point, Corey. And I've switched slides here, but that's fine because we're showing the historic resource here that we published in 2013. And that's built upon a couple thousand drill holes, Corey, that go back to the 80s, maybe even before that. We have a massive core storage facility in Eureka where we have drill core and cuttings. We have both analog databases that have now been digitized and digital databases from previous explorers. So we stand on the shoulders of a lot of good explorers here. And it's just that our focus has been a little bit different. And the technology and realizing the grade that's down there has allowed us to drill a little deeper than before. But the historic databases are a big part of what we do, Corey.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a quick overview of the existing Lookout Mountain resource. We're looking southwest now in this image, and the ridge in the center there is called Lookout Mountain. You can actually see some scratching on the side of that and the brown and red colors that come with a small open pit called the Lookout Pit, from which about 18,000 ounces of gold at 4 grams per ton were mined in the early 80s. But the red outline is more or less the surface expression of the footprint of this resource. Now, it's a lot like a lot of Nevada resources back in the day. It's kind of a sea of low grade, about 30 million tons of 0.62 grams per ton. A substantial portion of it is oxidized. So for some time, Timberline was focused on perhaps it'd be near-term production from this smaller operation, perhaps a heap leach operation if the metallurgy was favorable. But you'll notice that arrow there. There is a high-grade zone underneath that pit with substantial historic intercepts and our own drilling that confirmed a presence of a high-grade zone there, sort of trending northwest-southeast, dipping off to the east, and that's where the exploration focus has been of late for Timberline. It started with a water well hole in this area here adjacent to the resource, led to some gold sniffs there that has led to further drilling. That was in 2015, the first hole. And now we've got about 400 meters north to south of a footprint of a zone that seems to be hanging together at much higher grade than that resource. So we'll be talking about exploration in that area, off into the valley to the left-hand side of the photo, and a little out of the field of view, about a kilometer away to the Oswego target is where most of the exploration we're going to talk about is happening. And I'll just point out, too, that haul road there is significant. That was engineered and blasted through the mountains with 1980s dollars. It costs us nothing. It gives us all-season access to the center of the property. And in this mountainous part of Nevada, that's really helpful. We're really glad we didn't have to build that road.
So, Patrick, is the focus really going to be then on a bit more of the higher grade intercepts? Because, look, I think we all know that there are low grade assets that work in terms of mining being profitable in Nevada. But you mentioned that you were seeing 3-4 grams per ton gold in drill results. Is that the focus to bring the grade up?
It absolutely is. Look, low grade, to the extent that there's oxide mineralization at surface you can still walk up on in 2022, that's great news. But the grade will drive the overall resource size, which will get us the scale that would attract the attention of bigger investors or bigger partners, for instance. So absolutely, we're focused on grade, and I think you'll see why as we get into the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
We're looking at an oblique view here looking north, and we've got geology superimposed on topography, and you can see the Timberline claim position there, about 70 square kilometers, as I said. Certainly one of the major claim owners in this 10 million ounce gold district. And what we've highlighted here on the left-hand side are the Lookout Mountain resource areas. Those are shaded red. They span 4.5 kilometers north to south. And then there's this hatchered red blobs, which are drill indicated gold. You'll note that they line up on 3 trends. There's the Lookout trend over here, about 8 kilometers of drilling north to south. The Windfall trend over here, also something like 8 kilometers with some historic mining at the north. And then in the middle, about 4 kilometers of drill indicated gold on the Oswego trend. So those 3 trends define a lot of the structural corridor, if you will, the things we're looking for. But you'll note they correspond with that green on the map. The green are Cambrian and Ordovician sedimentary rocks that comprise the host rocks for most of the exciting new drilling that we're doing on our property, but also that Ewan and his team are doing at the top of the slide up there. You can see the Ruby Hill project of I-80 Gold. We're drilling in rocks like the Windfall Formation, the Dunderberg Shale, Hamburg Dolomite, and of course the Ordovician section also hosts the Goodwin and 9 Mile formations, which had a lot of the gold up at the historic Ruby Hill mine and in some of the recent drilling from Ewan's team. So this belt of rocks is significant because they're a little older than most of the Carlin type mineralization. And geologists tend to be kind of focused on one age group sometimes, and that those purple Silurian and Devonian rocks have gotten a lot of attention. In fact, McEwen Mining is mining in some of those rocks to our northwest. But here, this Cambrian Ordovician section deserves a lot more attention. It's finally getting it. And we think it's this belt here that'll be the core of the transition of Eureka from a silver camp to a multi-million ounce gold camp. Hopefully with a bit of luck for us and Ewan's team, we'll have multi-million ounces of reserves here and mines in the future.
So Patrick, since you're talking rocks, we had a question come in asking, is there an association between gold oxide deposits and refractory gold deposits?
There is, when in general, and it's a bit of a general statement, but a sulfide are not always refractory, by the way. One can have a sulfide deposit that can be processed without the need for pressure oxidation or roasting. But in any event, a sulfide deposit usually has stayed below subaerial exposure. So it hasn't been oxidized by weathering phenomenon or other geological fluids that can oxidize that mineralization. And often they would be the roots below an exposed part of the system, which is oxide. Now, that's a simplistic term. There are metallurgical test results required to be sure that something is leachable, obviously. And we, for instance, perform cyanide analyses on all our higher grade mineralization just to confirm, can you leach it with cyanide or not on a preliminary basis? And that helps you determine sometimes whether it's sulfide or oxide. It's not just appearance. There's a little bit more to it. But in general, they are related here. However, I'll point out, deep in some of our high grade intercepts, we are finding oxidized sections, for instance, in the Hamburg dolomite, where those rocks have been oxidized. And that mineralization, even though deeper, could be processed through conventional means as an oxide resource as well. So it's a little more complicated, but weathering is a key part of it.
So in terms of the Eureka district here, are we seeing both types of deposits?
We absolutely are seeing both types of deposits. The historic production at our Windfall area up in here was from oxide, as were the Lookout pit deposits there. And the stuff we're drilling deep in the water well zone just beside that happens to be higher grade and mostly sulfide. We do see both, and I believe Ewan will report the same up at I80.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That addresses those questions.
Now, I'm just going to take you through a bit of a 3D view of what we're drilling. And what we've tried to show you here by looking northwest, you'll notice the north arrow in the upper right of the slide, is this is the heart of the Lookout Mountain to Oswego part of our system here. So imagine this are through-going faults that trend more or less north-south, okay? That's a structural corridor, and this rock has been shattered in between. And maybe that's the plumbing that explains it. But you'll see on this slide a few things. Over here is the Lookout Mountain resource. There's the historic open pit. Across the valley is the Oswego showing, and the yellow outline in between is the water well zone. Now, what we've done further is we've shown you in with red discs high-grade gold intercepts. If it's a small disc, it's 3 grams or more. If it's a large disc, it's 10 grams or more. And so you can see a cluster of high-grade intercepts beneath that historic Lookout pit. And that led to a couple of holes in 2015 in this part of the water well zone right in here. And then in 2020 through this year, we've been drilling to expand that footprint, and you see a lot more of those high-grade discs showing up. So that's the water well zone where it lies between the Lookout Mountain target and the Oswego target across the valley. There's also a gray shape in the middle of this image. That's an IP chargeability anomaly. It's indicating that maybe there are rocks down there that conduct electricity if you introduce electricity, a chargeable volume of rock. And we've just gotten started drill testing that, and you see a bunch of blue discs there. That was a long intercept of silver that we intercepted there with lead and zinc and a bit of gold around the edges of it. That IP anomaly probably related to a granite that may have been responsible for some of that silver lead zinc mineralization historically we were talking about. Great targets to drill for gold around that as well. And so that really stitches together what may be multiple mineral systems in the structural corridor in the space of only about 1.5 kilometers east to west. Now, the last thing I'd say here is we've just highlighted some of the most exciting intercepts we reported beginning in February of this year. At the north in red, you see 44 meters of 4.1 grams in hole 220. You jump 400 meters south. The southernmost intercept in this zone is 41 meters of 5.1 grams or 5.03 grams, which includes more high grade within that. And then most recently in May, we reported 24 meters of almost 4 grams still inside that water well footprint. So you can see something starting to take shape there, and you can figure out that's probably where we're drilling this season. And then the gray line you see cutting through the slide right here is a line of section. We're going to show you what this stuff looks like in 3 dimensions looking north here with the next slide. Oops. So if we go to the next slide, here's a cross section looking north. This is a slice through the earth. A lot of information here. The main things to focus are we're showing you rock types by name, and you can see the stratigraphic column on the right side to see names of all these different rocks. The black lines are their bedding planes. Basically, they're dipping mostly to the east, as you can see. The red area labeled jasperoid right up here is a type of alteration that's silica and gold oxide coming to surface. That's where the resource starts, right there along that major fault, dips off to the east. And on the right-hand side, just look at that strat section. We've identified in red the rock types that are known to host Carlin-type mineralization here in Eureka and elsewhere in Nevada. So you see right in the middle, the Cambrian Windfall Formation, the Dunderberg Shale, the Hamburg Dolomite. Those are units that both I-80 Gold and Timberline are drilling regularly. I-80 has been reporting significant intercepts from the Goodwin Formation just above that, also highlighted in red. McEwen Mining is mining in those Devonian rocks higher up. And so this is some of the rocks known to host Carlin-type deposits. But as usual, as a geologist, I've thrown more data at you. And if you look closely, you can see a shaded unit here in the underneath this thing. This shaded blob here is part of the IP anomaly, the highest part of the IP anomaly. Those are chargeable rocks occupying the valley in here. They rise closer to the surface along the major faults. And you can see we have subtle IP anomalies in this area where we're drilling in what's the water well zone right now. In this area where we drilled into some of that silver mineralization I showed you, here to the west where we really haven't tested it here, and just the beginnings of something here at the Oswego target where we have high grade at surface. So that IP is telling us to look a little deeper, telling us there may be roots to this system, and it gives you an idea of the geometry of this stuff in 3 dimensions. It comes to surface, but it also has a lot of potential as we go deeper. Now, why are we looking at this district after all these years and all the holes drilled by those predecessor companies? This table is why. These are drill holes mostly by Staccato Gold, our predecessor company that we acquired, and Timberline, and they show you the grade kicking around in this area, even with the resource having a fairly low average grade. You can see intercepts such as the first one there, 15 meters of 18.4 grams from surface, drilled in 2006. I remember looking at that when I was at Newmont back in the day. 19.8 meters of 12 grams from 80 meters below surface. But then if you look down, those highlighted in red were drilled by Timberline in the last 2 drill seasons. Hole 176 there, 15 meters of 10 grams from only 20 meters below surface, and some lower grade ones there towards the bottom. But then we started rattling off these more significant recent intercepts, 41 meters of 5, including 19.8 meters of 9.5. And then you see there 44 meters of 4, including 12 meters of 9.2. So it's these high-grade roots hanging together with considerable thickness that give us reason to believe that we can increase the tonnage here with a lot more higher grade material. And on the right, some photos. What does this stuff look like? Classic Carlin-type sulfide mineralization. The picture on the right is 123 grams per ton. Over narrow width, you can see the red arsenic sulfide mineral there. The shininess of that rock is due to very fine-grained pyrite. On the left-hand side, 85.7 grams over narrow widths. Again, the red arsenic mineral, shiny there and hard because it's been silicified. And at the bottom, the yellow mineral is orpiment. That interval averaged over 5 grams per ton. So nice classic Carlin-type signatures, classic Carlin-type rocks, and high grade. This is why we're so excited about the Eureka District.
Patrick, one thing that also jumps out at me, especially with some of your guys drilling, is some of these results are deeper as well. I know a lot of these are close to surface, but some of these are over 300 meters deep within the system. What does that mean for overall potential size?
As we know in Nevada, the greatest discoveries in the last few years have been, for instance, Gold Rush and 4 Mile north of us up at the Cortez complex by Nevada Gold Mines and Barrick. And there you see, Corey, there are shallow things that came to surface, but now we're finding high grades at depth. And part of that is just structural preparation. Corey, you're mining down the plumbing. These faults have fractured up this rock and even better receiving those fluids. So look, we'd like it all to be at surface, but clearly we're in a mature mining camp and others have been here before us. If we had 15 grams at surface everywhere you looked, there wouldn't be much left. So the roots to the system tell you continuity. A big volume of rock has been affected by these fluids, Corey. To us, that speaks of a large system. Just as large amounts of arsenic, like we see in this red mineral, speak to a system that's carrying a lot of arsenic, which goes intimately with the gold. There are earmarks here that suggest this is a big system.
Okay, thank you.
Now, this is a very quick, I like to show this to the brokers because it's pretty straightforward. We've hatchered the water well zone there with the red hatchering, and we've drawn those big red arrows. If you were designing our drill program this year, where would you drill? You'd drill right next to the high-grade intercept at the north at 220C, where it's open to the north and the northwest. You drill to the east of some of these intercepts, and you'd certainly drill to the south of 212, open in those directions. And of course, we'll fill in that footprint a little bit better too, to see if this hangs together well enough to upgrade our resource ultimately. So the water well zone was a breakthrough because not only did we have grade and thickness, but it's hanging together quite well. Now I'm going to show you some sections quickly that show you where to go next around here at the, we'll show you one section here right through 212. Where we're going to drill in that area, and then right through 220 here. And then lastly, I'm going to show you a long section that comes like this, basically from northeast to southwest. And that'll help, I think, explain where we're drilling.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of questions on the drill program when assays are coming back. So I know people are excited, or at least interested in that drill program.
Yeah, that's my last slide, and this will preface it very nicely. So here you have the resource coming to the surface on the left-hand side of the figure there, outlined in red. That pinkish unit is the Cambrian-age Dunderberg shale. The mineralization is mostly hosted in the Dunderberg. As you go east, you'll notice hole 212C, that nice high-grade intercept, was at the base of the Dunderberg and the underlying Hamburg dolomite. We've hatchered it because the holes to the east that were previously drilled, they didn't quite go deep enough to hit the base of the Dunderberg where it's strongly mineralized. So it's open to the east. Then you hit a structure there, which we've hatchered. Those structures could easily be feeders, good porous zones for more mineralization. And those host rocks await us at depth when and if we want to drill deeper out there. Across the valley, the little star is the Oswego showing with that 25 meters of 14 grams and 27 meters of 12 at the surface on a significant fault there. Underneath that, you'll notice those OG and ON. Those are the Ordovician, Goodwin, and 9 Mile formations where Ewan is ripping some great intercepts up at I-80 Gold. They're not exposed here, but they are adjacent to a mineralized fault, and that's a tantalizing target for us. So that's how you would see. Logically, we're going to drill right to the right-hand side of 212. We're going to drill to the west of it. We're going to drill out of the screen, which would be coming to the south, and we're going to drill into the screen, which is to the north, because we want to follow that high-grade intercept and see if there's more of that significant grade thickness. That's a 200-gram-meter hole, obviously. The next section, further north, similar cartoon, a little bit more complicated geology, but there's the intercept again in 220C at the base of the Dunderberg shale, top of the Hamburg again. Now, as you go west, the resource does come to surface, but it's a bit skinnier up there. We put some question marks because it starts to pinch out. We don't know exactly what it does. As you go to the east, though, no drilling. You follow the Dunderberg-Hamburg contact into that complicated fault area there. You can see the IP anomaly is that gray blob I've drawn on the slide there. And around that area, it's really complicated. You can see the IP anomaly coming up like so. The blue stuff is a granitic rock through here that is probably Cretaceous in age. And look at all the silver intercepts that we hit along this first drill hole test of the IP anomaly. There's also some gold associated with that. It's lower grade here, but we're certainly seeing the smoke of a gold system as well. These big faults are always prospective because they may be the fluid pathways, and we've just begun to test the deeper target. And this isn't super deep, by the way. I believe this hole bottomed at about 500 meters. The top of the high-grade zone here, only 140 meters below surface. Super exciting when you get a 44-meter run of 4 grams that shallow. So nice result there on the northern part. And then lastly, this is a big part of the story. This is a long section from northeast to southwest. You can see those labels over on the sides of the slide. Over a kilometer. This is showing drill holes through the Dunderberg into the top of the Hamburg. Now, if you just notice here, this area down here to the south is in the resource area. And this area up here is the newly emerging water well zone. Okay, so right now they're not really connected. But every single drill hole that has hit the base of the Dunderberg shale has gold in it. You can see from these little histograms showing the gold. Sometimes it's thick and high grade. Sometimes it's thinner. Some of these holes, however, in the middle inside the black box in this area are decent intercepts, 32 meters of 1.7. But those were drilled with reverse circulation below the water table. And as we reported earlier this year, core drilling has been consistently returning better grades and greater thickness than the RC drilling, and we continue to test that with this year's drill program. So we're going to put a couple of core holes to offset these reverse circulation holes to test. because we think the grades could be better down here in the deeper part of the system when we get in there with core holes, which is part of the 2022 drill program. So the main takeaway here is over a kilometer, every time you drill the base of the Dunderberg, there's gold. We're quite excited about that. And the average thickness of this zone so far in the water well area is over 18 meters thick. Nice, consistent contact there, mineralized well. So we'll just close up really quick here by mentioning a few kilometers away. This is the Windfall part of our property, and the 3 historic mines I've mentioned. You'll see we're right there on the location map, a few kilometers away in the northeast of the property. And what you see there are 3 open pits from which 115,000 ounces of oxide gold was produced in the 70s and 80s. You see that beautiful, beautiful haul road coming right through and continuing to the lower left down to Lookout. And over that 3.7 kilometers or 2.7 kilometers of our drilling, we started drilling here in 2015 and 2018, I think. You'll see intercepts like 24 meters of 3 grams between these pits, 27 meters of 2.2 grams between these pits. Even to the north, just over the property boundary, our friends at Golden Lake have drilled an intercept up there to the north at the same contact between the Dunderberg and the Hamburg. You look at a cross section, and here it is again, those familiar rock type names. The Dunderberg Shale here and the Hamburg Dolomite, where they contact. We've got a great drill intercept there of 24 meters of 3 grams between the pits. Quite a lot of high-grade samples from the pit itself, oxide mineralization coming to surface. And frankly, we've just been too busy at Lookout and Waterwell to do a lot here at the Windfall Zone. And yet, this would make a standalone project for many junior companies, just part of the numerous exploration targets that we'll see sort of the next cab off the rank mentality as we advance early stage exploration while moving other pods of mineralization into resource, we hope. So I'll wrap up, Corey, and this will probably answer a few questions. This is more or less the slide we issued in June showing the areas we would be focusing the drilling this year. You see the water well zone in the middle and those high-grade discs we've been speaking about. And then in blue are this year's drill holes. 16 of them completed or in progress are shown as the blue dots. We have a mixture of RC samples, our RC drilling, such as up here in the relay zone, over here at Oswego, a couple of RC holes. And then in the main part of the water well zone, we typically have been drilling an RC pre-collar down to the water table, more or less, and then a core hole through the zone of interest. You can see we're hitting the south end pretty hard so far. We've just started hitting the north end of the water well zone right up in this area here. We've just put in a couple of holes up in that area to offset the high grade there. We went even further north into the relay zone. You can also see we've jumped way to the south in South Pediment with the hole there. Notice that there's a real lack of drilling as you go south here. It's wide open in that direction. So about 7,000 meters expected to be drilled. We're about 60 or 65% through that. The good news is both drilling contractors and the team in the field are under budget on a per meter basis for both the RC and the core drilling. And we're super excited about that. Drill results will start flowing here in the next couple of weeks. We'll probably have a press release before the end of August, and we'll be drilling through October with really steady news flow, really through the third trimester of the year, right into the winter. So that's the program, about 7,000 meters. We're about 60, 65% done with it so far.
Okay, Patrick, thank you. One final question that we can just quickly address is cash in the bank. Are you fully funded through this program to the end of the year?
We raised just under $5 million US back in May, and we've still got over $3 million US in the bank. We put a fully funded program together here. No need to raise money, and we'll have a nice little nest egg in the bank when we're done, particularly since the team is operating under budget. So we're doing well. We'd like to drill a lot more of those. So hopefully the results will justify a lot bigger drill program, either continuing through the winter, which is our hope, or drilling a lot more next year.
Okay. Perfect, Ewan. Let's get you in here then. The I80 Gold presentation. I'm going to fire this up. All right. Yeah, Ewan, I think just take us away. I've already have a couple questions saved up for you, but I'm going to let you get into the presentation first, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to whip through our presentation as quickly as possible. And thanks to Patrick, he did a good job at explaining the geology of the area. So I will try not to be too geological in terms of our presentation. I80 Gold is obviously very active. We're one of the 4 primary active companies in the Eureka portion of the Battle Mountain Eureka trend, along with Timberline, and obviously we're following very closely what our neighbors do. I80 Gold Corp is one of the industry's newest gold producers. We have two heap leach projects working right now. They're all residual leaching. We're just started mining at our Granite Creek project, and we are constructing the Cove mine also right now in Nevada. We expect to begin the underground decline at Ruby Hill here in the Eureka district here in the near future. And all of these projects are expected to feed our autoclave. And our autoclave facility is shown here on our introductory slide. I80 is entirely a US focused company. We trade on the TSX and the New York Stock Exchange. And we believe that our company is one of the fastest growing gold producers in the industry. Again, entirely our production comes from Nevada, USA. As Patrick had, I will be talking about some forward-looking information. So I urge everybody to read this statement and go through it and consider this as you listen to our presentation and look at our slides. We view our company as one of the premier US growth companies. We operate entirely in one of the safest jurisdictions. We have permitted infrastructure, an autoclave, a flotation circuit, a heap leach, and a tailings facility at Lone Tree. We also have a CIL plant and heap leach at Ruby Hill in the Eureka Trend. Our growth profile over our 5-year plan is to exceed 400,000 ounces on an annual basis. This year, we expect to do somewhere between 20 and 40, so a pretty significant growth profile over the next several years. We have extensive gold and silver resources in the state of Nevada. You can see we have in the measured and indicated and inferred categories. We also have completed some technical studies and continue to upgrade the studies for our projects as time goes on. The postage stamp here in north central Nevada is one of, if not the world's most productive gold district. The largest producer, the blue dots, is Nevada Gold Mines, a joint venture between Newmont and Barrick. And in the Battle Mountain, Carlin, Getchell, and down to the south where Ruby Hill and Timberline is operating, the Eureka Trend, we are now the second largest holder of gold resources. We're planning to construct 4 new mining operations that feed a central facility at Lone Tree over the next roughly 2.5 years. One thing to point out is as Timberline, you can drive to every one of our projects. They're all road accessible. We have grid power, and we have our water rights to pursue development.
Since you mentioned water, there was a question that popped in here just asking how water issues impact the general region and the projects. Take us through some of what you guys have done in terms of the water.
We are permitted at all sites. We have our water rights to pursue development at all sites, including at Ruby Hill. So there is a current dewatering program going at Ruby Hill. Ruby Hill, compared to what we see up at Cove, especially, and what you see in the Carlin Trend where Gold Strike and the Carlin mines are, the water isn't an issue to the extent that you find in other mines in the Carlin and Battle Mountain Trend. But we do have to monitor water. We will have to take down the water table for development. And we are currently making sure that we have everything in place to be able to do that for the long term.
Okay, thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, we are one of the largest holders of gold and silver resources in the state of Nevada. But one thing, in my view, that will ensure our long-term success in the state is we are one of only 3 companies who have infrastructure that is capable of processing refractory ore. And for the most part, Nevada Gold Mines has transitioned all of their oxide mines to now sulfide. So they've gone from the heap leach being the primary focus for their production to now the autoclaves and roasters. So we were successful at acquiring one of Nevada Gold Mines' 4 processing facilities. That's Lone Tree. And it's perhaps the most strategically located facility, given it sits right on Interstate 80 and right beside the Nevada Central Railway. That'll allow us to bring in bulk commodities and potentially ship base metals once we move to base metals.
So is Lone Tree going to be the operation facility to bring you up to that? I believe it was 400,000 ounces a year plan?
Yeah, the 400,000 ounces would include the 3 projects, Cove, Ruby Hill, and Granite Creek, all three underground declines, virtually three identical underground mines feeding one central facility. And we're also planning to construct an open pit at Granite Creek that's running over 1 gram per ton. So that's in our future growth.
Okay, thank you.
When you look at our company in the Carlin and Battle Mountain trends, we are second only to Nevada Gold Mines in terms of resources, and we're in terms of gold resources in the state of Nevada, and we're third in the entire state. We have two major drilling campaigns going, more than 30,000 meters of underground surface drilling underway at Granite Creek, where we've made a new discovery called the South Pacific Zone, and more than 20,000 meters. In fact, we've just bumped up our program at Ruby Hill owing to the success we've been seeing to approximately 30,000 meters. And at the end of this year's campaign, we expect to release revised resource estimates for our projects. And it's our goal to increase our overall gold equivalent resources by 20%.
What's going to be the balance, too, of upgrading that inferred component? Because you're saying with 8.1 million ounces there.
Yeah, we're growing the inferred component at Granite Creek. We are upgrading to measured and indicated. And the same at Ruby Hill, we're upgrading measured and indicated. So with 6.5 million measured and indicated, we have a pretty long opportunity at mine life as it sits. So it's not a huge priority right now. We do have the goal of looking at where is the end of some of the footprints of the projects we're doing. The Granite Creek discovery that we're drilling is well in excess of 10 grams per ton. So it's a pretty exciting discovery, and we're stepping out such that we hope the bulk of that drilling will come into inferred.
So it sounds like still there's a lot of growth opportunities here. Most companies, when you have that large of a resource base, sometimes just settle and stick to it. You're seeing a whole lot of, it sounds like, expansion opportunity as well.
Yeah, especially as I mentioned at Granite Creek, we're having the zone that we discovered appears to be much larger and more continuous than the area that we're developing the mine on. So we believe it's going to be the most important component of the future of the Granite Creek operation. And the same at Ruby Hill. We're testing 5 new conceptual exploration targets this year, in addition to expanding the existing zones. And so at the same time as we're preparing for our releasing our mine plan for the Ruby Hill project, the underground mine plan, we're also testing new targets, because there could always be something better than what we're mining. And we want to make sure that we're mining the best areas, not just the most easily accessible areas. In terms of grades, our 3 projects where we have open pit resources rank in amongst the highest grades that you'll see in Nevada and in the United States. And 2 of our 3 underground deposits have grades in excess of 10 grams per ton. As I mentioned earlier, our plan is to construct 3 underground mines, Granite Creek, Cove, and Ruby Hill, all feeding the autoclave complex, because our focus is refractory mineralization. And our target is to exceed 250,000 ounces a year production in 2025. That's the first year we expect to have at full run rate at this site. Buffalo Mountain is an open pit project that we expect to start developing probably next year. And it would be processed at the Lone Tree facility as well, because we have an existing heap leach pad. Just looking at our autoclave, it is one thing that makes us unique in the state of Nevada. But I'll move on to Ruby Hill, because Ruby Hill is we are advancing an underground mining plan here that is the largest deposit in our company's portfolio. You can see in the slide here on slide 10, the active heap leach project, which is in the background where you can see the black lines. Those are the lines across the heap leach pad. And in the foreground is the CIL plant. The CIL plant is currently idle, and it may factor into our near-term future given what we're seeing in drilling. We're having substantial success in exploration here at Ruby Hill. We're expanding our Ruby Deeps deposit. We're expanding the 426. In fact, we just announced additional results on Tuesday from 426, which were quite outstanding in our view. And as I mentioned earlier, we're testing 5 generative exploration targets. Ruby Hill is the largest deposit in our portfolio, and we believe that we are making it even bigger with this year's drill program. And for us, it provides the ultimate optionality. There's refractory underground gold mineralization. There's oxide underground mineralization that we are drilling in the 426 zone. In fact, we're seeing more oxide in the 426 than we anticipated. We have oxide open pit mineralization. The Mineral Point is the largest single deposit in our portfolio. It's a plus 5 million ounce open pit project that we expect to advance in the future. We have polymetallic mineralization, blackjack, underneath the pit. Because of the location of the blackjack zone, we aren't doing any exploration in blackjack itself, but we are testing some nearby targets that we expect to be discussing more in the near future. And that's the polymetallic, so the silver base metal mineralization in this area. We have an operating heap leach facility and an on-site CIL milling facility that you see in the image on the lower left. The project, as you can see here on the surface plan, in red is the Ruby Deeps and 426 deposits. Those are the first two deposits that we are advancing economic studies on. They're located immediately below the Archimedes pit, and the decline that we expect to construct will be within the Archimedes pit. We are testing 4 new Carlin-style targets: the Graveyard Flats fault structure, the D2 structure, Blue Sky, and Ruby North, north of the pit. And we're testing this 427 polymetallic target immediately south of Blackjack as well.
So when you're testing these targets, how quickly could they be brought into a resource? Obviously, it won't be in the first round of drilling. What would the process be?
I just say that of the 5 exploration targets that we've tested so far, we have just started receiving preliminary results on some of these targets. 2 of these targets we are doing follow-up drilling. I'm not sure if we'll be able to do sufficient drilling to move these to resource by the end of the year, if they're continuous enough. But we are definitely doing some follow-up drilling.
Okay, thank you.
So when you look at the mineralization, the main zones that we're pursuing are Ruby Deeps, which is a flat-lying north-south striking deposit that occurs up against the Hawley Fault. That's the red line on the far left or the west. And then the 426 mineralization, which is a subvertical fault that is open to the south and open at depth. It could intersect it could intersect the Ruby Deeps at depth. And therefore, we believe that's part of the reason we're starting to see mineralization both above and below the Bullwhacker Sill. And the Bullwhacker Sill is an important component of the Ruby Deeps deposit. You can see here numerous intercepts of up to almost 20 grams over 30 meters. That's our southernmost hole with assays so far in Ruby Deeps. And our northernmost hole hit 78.6 meters of 7.1 grams, including 10 grams over nearly 42 meters. And then just on Tuesday, we released all those intercepts you see in the 426 zone with intercepts of 12.2 meters of 15.6 grams and 13.9 grams per ton over 13 meters, amongst others. So very high grades, well in excess of the resource that was completed here by Wood on behalf of Waterton. And we are expecting to see not only an increase in ounces when we upgrade this, but also an increase in grade. The image you see here is some of the intercepts we've been drilling in the 426 zone and the Ruby Deeps. Ruby Deeps, the sort of gray unit you see within the Windfall formation, is a sill. It's a granodiorite sill that we call the Bullwhacker Sill. And it could be cause a pooling effect where the Hawley Fault comes down, and therefore in the north part of drilling in the Ruby Deeps deposit, the mineralization tends to occur almost immediately below the Bullwhacker Sill. As we move to the south, the southernmost hole, we saw 8.2 grams over 22 meters above the sill and almost 20 grams over more than 30 meters below the sill. the deposit remains completely open along strike to the north and the south. But as you can see, when the 426 is more of a subvertical unit comes into that area, we see mineralization above the sill, and those could be feeder structures that allowed mineralization to permeate through the sill and up into the upper units. Just quickly look at our other projects. Granite Creek is situated immediately south of Turquoise Ridge. That's the third largest of Nevada Gold Mines operations, and we're drilling a new deposit there that we've discovered this, what appears to be a fairly large deposit at depth called South Pacific. We're doing step-out drilling at South Pacific. And we've also started the construction of the Cove Mine, which is one of the highest grade undeveloped gold deposits in the United States with grades in excess of 10 grams per ton. So I will stop the presentation there and we can maybe move into some questions.
Yeah, let's talk about circling back around to that inferred and indicated resources. What's the drill density used there to differentiate the two?
Typically, we're using when we can demonstrate continuity along strike or as we move to depth in these structures, we're looking at approximately 50-meter spacing for inferred. So between 25 and 50-meter spacings for inferred, and tighter than 25 meters for measured and indicated resources.
Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of operations, I understand a lot of investors are a little bit worried about the decreasing gold price or a continued decrease in the gold price. Just remind everybody of some of your costs in terms of mining and how profitable the asset still will be even at lower gold prices.
Yeah, right now in our last 2 quarters, our all-in sustaining cost for the 2 residual leaching projects is right around $1,300 an ounce. We do expect to see some decline in that here in the 3rd and 4th quarters. We've completed 2 preliminary economic assessments that show, that demonstrate, at least when they were completed, all-in sustaining costs of under $1,000. When you're running underground grades of 10 to 12 grams per ton, you tend to see lower costs than you'd see it more in the lower cost, the lower grade operations. And these higher grade underground mines, you don't use as much fuel, et cetera, and you're not moving as much quantity of rock as you would in a large low grade open pit. So somewhat more immune to cost inflation from fuel, which is one of the bigger causes of the inflation we're seeing these days, in my opinion.
Now, are there any deleterious elements or minerals that we should be aware of within any of these resources or even potential at any of the new targets that you're drilling?
Yeah, I think most Nevada deposits, especially the Carlin-style deposits, have an association with arsenic. So you have to deal with those as you're processing your mineralization, either in your tailings pond or if you do dry stack. But it's normal. Nevada Gold Mines is producing over 3 million ounces a year from these deposits. And if you look at the team we've assembled here, most of our senior management has come from or either has a former history with Nevada Gold Mines. So we're well aware of what's required and what the regulations are to deal with these. And then there's some mercury. One of the things we'll be doing to our autoclave before we restart it is upgrading the mercury abatement infrastructure because of regulations have become a bit more stringent, but the amount of mercury made is pretty minimal, and we'd ultimately likely sell that mercury.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ewan, it seems like you've addressed a lot of the questions that came in, but I want you just to quickly highlight the company here to explain a little bit for investors. Is I80 Gold, should it be viewed as a high-grade producer? We all understand that the growth in terms of just ounces produced is growing, but that balance between some of that low-grade material in the open pit mines and then what we're hearing is much higher-grade material than what we usually hear about in Nevada.
Yeah, we are looking, when we restart the autoclave facility, is doing approximately 2,800 tons per day through that facility. So roughly 1,000 tons coming from each operation. Cove's average grade is 10.9 grams, making it one of the higher grade deposits under development in all of North America right now. Granite Creek is similar. The new South Pacific zone we're drilling is displaying grades well in excess of 10 grams per ton. So we've got a lot of results coming from there. And Ruby Hill, I believe one of the analysts that published on Tuesday said the average grade of our 426 drilling was 11 grams over 11 meters, so significantly higher than the current resource grade. So there's not a lot of plus 10 gram mines operating today. And so we think that's something that makes us unique. But we're, as you can see, a lot of development right now. If you look at the Lassonde curve, we're in that development phase. But Granite Creek should start producing gold by the end of this year and ramp up even further next year. So we do expect in the next couple of years to become cash flow positive instead of just spending money. Currently, we're well suited in cash. We have over 130 million at the end of last quarter US in cash.
Okay, one final question. I'm getting a number of comments on that Blackjacks area and deposit. It sounds like you're not spending too much of a focus here, but some people are asking, look, could Blackjacks be the American version of LaRonde? I know that's a big comment to address, but can you just give us a little more color on Blackjacks and the work going on there, please?
Yeah, Blackjack is situated immediately below the pit. And if you know the history of the Ruby Hill project, the Barrick sold the project while they were mining it, because here in the south end of the image you see here on slide 13, they had a pit wall failure. And that, instead of rehabbing the pit wall, they just put the property up for sale and Waterton bought it. Blackjack is situated immediately below that pit wall failure. So it's a very difficult position to drill from, because we can't disturb that historic pit wall failure unless we rehabilitate it. But I would expect that Blackjack's grades, especially in terms of base metals, are considerably higher than what you'd find at LaRonde. The deposit is open along strike and it is open at depth. I'm not going to say it's going to be the size of LaRonde, but because it was a base metal or a polymetallic deposit, it does have locally very good gold and silver credits. Because it was more of a base metal deposit than gold, Barrick and Homestake did very little work on it. And we're exploring to the south, looking at these structures as they move towards the FAD deposit. FAD is another high-grade polymetallic deposit that is being advanced by one of the other active companies in the area, Paycore. And we believe that the base metal opportunity, when you look at that structure between Blackjack and FAD, could be something on the scale of a LaRonde. So it has been an overlooked part of this property, but we definitely think it could be an American version of LaRonde. Well, we certainly hope it becomes that.
All right, guys, you know what? We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for spending time with us, Patrick, Ewan. I think you guys addressed a lot of the questions that came in. If anybody has any follow-up questions, please email me directly, fleck@kereport.com. I will be having Patrick and Ewan back on my show to follow up on some of the questions that come in and keep everybody up to speed on each of their stories. But this really was a nice overview for everybody. So again, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Patrick, Ewan, both, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Corey. It was great to be here. Thank you, Ewan, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for having us on as well. And Patrick, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what comes out of your ongoing drill program. We'll be sure to have a look if you let us, and then you come up and have a look at what we're doing as well. You're quite welcome to do that.
Absolutely, Ewan. Thank you.